Modern History, Changes in Medicine, during 1848 and 1948. Lesson 2. Who is Florence Nightingale? Florence Nightingale was born on May 12, 1820, in Florence, Italy, to a wealthy British family. Her parents were William Edward Nightingale, an English landowner, and Frances Nightingale, who came from a family of merchants and bankers. Florence was named after the city of her birth. As a child, Florence was educated by her father, who taught her mathematics, science, and philosophy. She also learned French, German, and Italian, and became an accomplished musician and artist. In 1837, her family moved back to England, and Florence continued her education with private tutors and by attending schools in London and elsewhere. In 1851, Florence decided to become a nurse, much to her family's dismay. At the time, nursing was not considered a respectable profession for women of her social class. She trained at the Institute of St. Vincent de Paul in Alexandria, Egypt, and later worked as a nurse in hospitals in Germany, France, and England. In 1854, the Crimean War broke out. The Crimean War was a military conflict fought between Russia and a coalition of France, Britain, the Ottoman Empire, and Sardinia. The war began in 1853 and lasted until 1856. One of the most significant events of the Crimean War was the Siege of Sevastopol, a major Russian port on the Black Sea. British, French, and Ottoman forces launched an attack on the city in September 1854, but they were unable to capture it. The siege lasted for almost a year, and the fighting was particularly brutal. During the war, reports of the terrible conditions in military hospitals reached the public. The condition at Scutari during the Crimean War was appalling. The British Barrack Army Hospital, in Turkey, where wounded soldiers were being treated, was in a state of chaos. The hospital was overcrowded, and the wounded soldiers were lying on the floor, with little sanitation or medical care. The hospital was infested with rats, and the stench was overwhelming. The soldiers were suffering from a variety of diseases, including cholera, typhoid, and dysentery. There were not enough doctors or nurses to care for the patients, and many of the soldiers were dying from their injuries or illnesses. There are some historical accounts that suggest that the hospital in Scutari, where Florence Nightingale and her team of nurses worked during the Crimean War, was built on a cesspool. However, this claim is disputed, and it is difficult to say with certainty whether or not it is true. As mentioned earlier, what is clear is that the hospital was in a state of disrepair and lacked basic sanitation measures. The soldiers were crowded together in dirty and overcrowded wards, which led to the rapid spread of infectious diseases like cholera and typhus. The hospital was also infested with rats and other vermin, which further exacerbated the unsanitary conditions. The British government sent a team of nurses to Scutari, Turkey, where wounded soldiers were being treated, in an effort to improve the situation. Sidney Herbert, the Secretary of War and a friend of her family, asked Nightingale to go to Scutari to sort out the nursing care in the hospital. It was there that Florence Nightingale and her team of nurses arrived in November 1854 to help care for the wounded soldiers. The army opposed women nurses, as they were considered inferior and a distraction. Nightingale went away, taking 38 hand-picked nurses with her. They found the hospital in a state of chaos, with little sanitation or medical care for the patients. Florence immediately set to work, organizing the hospital and implementing strict sanitation practices. Florence immediately set to work, organizing the hospital and implementing strict sanitation practices. She emphasized the importance of hygiene and cleanliness, which helped to reduce the number of deaths from infectious diseases. She and her team of nurses worked tirelessly to clean the hospital, provide the soldiers with clean clothes and bedding, and serve them nutritious food. She was also known as the Lady with the Lamp, as she worked tirelessly to comfort the wounded soldiers, often staying up all night to tend to their needs. After the war, Florence returned to England and became a celebrity. She was hailed as a hero for her work in the Crimean War, and her efforts helped to improve the status of nursing as a profession. She was also a passionate advocate for public health and social reform and worked to improve the living conditions of the poor and to promote women's rights. In 1860, Florence founded the Nightingale Training School for Nurses at St. Thomas Hospital in London. She also wrote several influential books on nursing and public health, including Notes on Nursing and Notes on Hospitals. She used statistical methods to demonstrate the importance of sanitation and public health in preventing disease and was the first woman to be elected a Fellow of the Royal Statistical Society. In later life, Florence suffered from poor health and was often bedridden. She continued to work on public health and social reform issues and corresponded with politicians and public figures on a wide range of topics. She died on August 13, 1910, at the age of 90. Florence Nightingale's legacy as a pioneer of modern nursing and public health continues to inspire people around the world. Her dedication to improving the lives of others and her commitment to social justice and equality remain an enduring testament to the power of compassion and activism.